Well, folks, it's been a pretty busy summer here so far between work and everything else going on. I'm not going to give you the same old spiel over and over again. You guys know how it is by now. Anyways, I have some time here on this Sunday afternoon, and I figured it would be as good a time as any to replace the forward-reverse planetaries in the rear transmission of the four-wheel drive. And I haven't started this since PA plow day. It's been sitting up on the hill in the woods since I think a day after I got home in April. So I just went up back to fire it up and threw a battery in it, and it cranked right over without an issue. So I got it down here on the lift table, and we're going to see about splitting this rear transmission apart from all this center joint and everything else. I'm going to make an attempt to do this and not have to take any of the hydraulic lines off, and I'm going to see if I can get it to split from this plate here, and then if I can just turn it a little bit to get the advanced casting off, which would be this, to get to the planetaries that are underneath. And I have plenty of sets of those out back to replace it with. So anyways, we're going to start by getting the oil drained on this thing and getting some of these cables freed up, and along with taking off the steering cylinder on the other side. So I got my steering cylinder off and the oil drained out of the rear transmission here, along with freeing up my hydraulic lines for a little bit more movement. Hopefully I don't have to take them off, but I might have to, depending on what I have for room to play with. So I'm going to unbolt everything from the center joint here and see if I can roll this rear transmission back and just cock it to the side so I can get this casting off. And I have some blocking under the 3-point hitch, so when I roll it back I can ratchet strap it right to the lift table, hopefully keep it from moving around too much. Alright, Planetaries have been pulled out. I'm going to have to see if I can flush out this transmission or scrape it out a little bit more. You can see there's a whole lot of gook inside there from the water getting into the oil. So it just ended up all curting up in there, so that's going to have to get scraped out. I think the majority of it came out of the advanced casting. It might have been leaking in through where the PTO plate was, I'm not sure. This gear on the Planetary, I don't know what this one would be called, maybe the dish or the cup, but this one's all set. The gears they're a little bit worn, but they're fairly good, you know, for what I've pulled out of a lot of these and what some of them look like. And here is the Planetary set as it came out of the transmission. So, as you can see, this top orbital gear right here has a little bit of discoloration where my finger is. You can see it's more of a bluish purple color. That is the one that ended up seizing in here. The other two that are on this are both moving, and those are both free. But this one here was the one that seized up. So I forgot which way these work. When these Planetaries get engaged, either one way or the other, either this carrier assembly stays stationary inside the Planetary, and when you flip the lever the other way, the entire carrier spins. So I'm guessing, because this gear was on the top when I pulled it out, that however I have this thing driving itself in forward, this carrier assembly more than likely is stationary inside the Planetaries. And what happened is this one was all the way at the top and it wasn't getting splashed, or any lubricant wasn't getting kicked up onto it from going around and around, but the two on the bottom were still getting a little bit of oil. So that's my best guess on why it seized up, because I didn't have enough in the rear transmission and it just wasn't enough to splash up into there. So luckily enough, it wasn't as bad as I figured it was going to be. I had a feeling these were going to be all eaten up and chewed out, but luckily enough, that's a fairly easy fix. So I went up onto the hill quick and I found another carrier assembly. I remember the tractor that this came out of because those shoulder bolts had backed out and they started to slam into those gears, and this actually was another stuck Planetary set that I had to change out because the entire assembly was spinning as one, gears and everything. So what I'm going to do is pull, I think that one or that one out. I don't know which one was in better shape. And then I'll take the bushing out and I'll just replace this gear as itself with the bushing, and then I can reassemble. So luckily enough, it'll be a pretty quick fix. I have a feeling I'm going to have to pull this entire assembly apart. I was trying to skirt around that, but looks like I won't be able to. I just loosened up these other two bolts and that gave me enough room to be able to do that. It looks like it might have spun briefly before it seized up, but it didn't chew into this plate any, which is good. Yeah, it did spin. Didn't spin much, but a little bit. But I'm sure that bushing is just about as stuck as ever inside of there. But like I said, it's a pretty easy fix for what it is. So on this one here, we're going to end up taking out this gear, because that's the best looking one. This one's a little bit chewed up, and I think this one's a little bit marked from this one coming loose. So we'll pull that out, clean it up, and it's a very easy swap into the other Planetary carrier. Unfortunately, these gears don't have oil holes drilled in them like the engine Planetaries do, because the engine Planetaries are spinning at engine RPM, which is in some cases is 3600. So what they ended up doing was drilling oil holes in all of the Planetary gears, because they have brass bushings, and that way the oil gets into the bushing and keeps everything lubricated. But on the forward reverse Planetaries, they're not spinning as fast, so they never put any oil holes into them. This has one little nick on the tooth, but for what it's going into and as often as it's going to get driven, it's not even something I'm going to worry about. So I'm just going to chuck this into the parts washer quick and get all the grit off of it, and we'll be ready to stuff it into that carrier set. I took the rest of the carrier assembly apart so I can get this other gear into here. Now I forgot that these had timing marks on them. I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but there is a small pock mark right there, along with the other two that are on here. And I never really knew whether these actually had to be timed or not. I couldn't really see where they would have to, but just for the sake of putting it back together the right way, I suppose, and making sure nothing else happens, that's what we're gonna do. So you can't see them when they're flipped like this, so I'd marked them with a yellow China marker so that way I could see where it's gonna end up falling. So right now I have the timing mark pretty much dead nuts sticking out straight on each one, and they should all be to the inside when I turn this evenly, which they are. So those are right where they should be, and then all I have to do is drop this top plate on there with the other orbital gears. And everything should be just where it ought to be. And from the looks of it, the timing marks are still all lined up. So those are all set. Once again, like I said, I don't know if it matters or not, but I might as well at least line them up anyways for the time that it takes to do it. You might as well. So I'm just going to get these bolts tightened back down again, and then we can get this thing ready to go back into the Planetary set. So before I put these Planetary sets back together, I'm going to have to scrape off my old gasket here on the face of the transmission on the mating surface. I also have to spend some quality time with long nose needle nose and a roll of paper towels and see if I can clean as much of this gunk out of the transmission as I can. That's just from moisture getting into the oil, and it's just all mudded up down the bottom. I really don't want to have to pull an axle housing off to clean it, so I'm going to see if I can get most of it out doing this, and then anything else that's left in there will have to just get flushed out when I put the oil back into it. Well, everything's all cleaned up. I got as much of that gunk out of the back of the bottom of the transmission as I could. So we can start putting the Planetary assembly back in. That ring gear is a little worn, but it's going back in anyways. It's not too bad. This thing doesn't get used much anyhow. When putting these Planetary assemblies back together, sometimes you can put the entire assembly together on the bench as a whole with all this stuff and just slide it in there as one unit, or you can get it into the advanced casting and slide it in here as one unit. But I always found that it was easier to put it together sometimes piece by piece depending on the situation, like so, because then you can just keep stacking everything in as it goes. That goes in there first, not the other way around. last thing I have to do is slip on the advanced casting, and that takes care of that. Alright, I got everything hooked back up onto the outside here, and I just have to put my PTO plate into the end, and we'll be able to be ready to put this thing back together again. Everything's hooked all back up again. I got my drive shaft greased for the first time and who knows how long, or at least the splines where it slides onto the yokes. Unfortunately, these are not greasable U-joints in here, so I just have to wait until it goes and then end up finding another drive shaft or pressing in some new ones. So I gotta fill up this back transmission with oil. So what I did is I pulled the dipstick out of the front transmission. I never had one in the back transmission because, hey, I figured the back one doesn't need as much oil as the front, but of course that's about to change now. So at least with this dipstick here, I'll be able to get the correct height for the rear transmission, and I have almost 4 gallons of used 1540 motor oil that I have drained out of Case hydraulic drive garden tractors. A customer of mine from down in Connecticut owns a whole slew of them. So this is all lightly used 1540, which I figure will be good enough of a lubricant for this rear transmission, and I got plenty of it, so I might as well use it. So I'm going to lower the table down here a little bit so I can tilt the jug and we can get this sucker topped off to where it should be. Rear end is all topped off with oil, and we're back out here and running now. So before, when these seized up, the PTO shaft, I was not able to engage it because it wanted to spin everything in the rear transmission, and the wheels were spinning incredibly fast when I jacked up the rear end. But obviously enough, now that the planetaries are fixed, I can engage the PTO and everything's moving like it should be. So we might as well take this out back and have some fun up in the woods, drive it around a little and see how it does. So I'll take you guys out back with me and see what we can crawl around. Well, it's good to have the old four-wheel drive going again. At least I'll be able to yank some stuff around here, tractors and equipment and whatnot, when I can't tow it with the wheel horse tow truck. So it was a pretty easy fix. It only took me about an hour and a half or so to change out that gear in the Planetaries, and I had everything back together. I knew it had seized down in Pennsylvania, but I also had a feeling that maybe some more stuff ended up blowing apart inside there. Luckily enough, it ended up being a very easy fix. So it's good to have the thing mobile again and not just sitting in the middle of the woods. It was sort of in the middle of the path and had a heck of a time pulling trailers and stuff around it. So anyways, we'll have to see how the projects list pans out for the rest of this end of the summer and early fall. I might be getting an update video up just to catch everybody up to speed on how things have been going over the summer. Depends on how time pans out here. I do have some tractor and engine projects that are waiting on time for a video, and once again we'll have to see how work pans out and if it allows time for that. But I figured I'd at least get this thing done. It was a nice easy fix, so it was a good opportunity to do a little repair video with some driving around. So anyways folks, until next time, there you have it.